Hello everyone, welcome to the studio. I'm Canblaster and I'm here to talk about this collaboration I did with BLEASS. It's an arpeggiator. We've been working on it for about a year and finally it's out. So I'm gonna show you what it does. Just like me, the BLEASS team comes from the north of France, so when we met, we clicked instantly. They told me about this arpeggiator they were working on, so I was really excited about that, and we came up with some ideas very quick. But really for us, it was important to get out of the regular, like boring arpeggio style, you know, very regular, always the same notes, to put a lot of randomness, to put some movement, different rhythms, different notes, polyphony as well, and really to make something that is fun to play with. I really hope you can have fun and do some cool stuff with it. Now I'm gonna show you a bit how it works. Let's go. Alright, first off, let's do a quick overview of the plugin. We have the arpeggiator board. This is kind of the main board. That is where the magic happens. Obviously, you will recognize some stuff like the rate, the play mode, you know, up. Other ones that are a bit weirder that we're gonna see later, but this is how we get some rhythm and some special melodies into the arpeggiator. Then we got the performance board. Once we set up everything in there, we're gonna be able to link it to the mod wheel, to our synthesizer. So with that XY, you can use your finger to move the effects in real time, but you can also use it on the laptop, just like I do. Then the really interesting sections, you have two inbuilt LFOs inside of the arpeggiator that you can link to a lot of parameters. This one is the motion sequencer. It's pretty unique and I'm really excited to show you how it works, but basically you can link anything to that sequencer and it will react. And finally, we have a little synthesizer inside. It's a double FM, very simple. We're gonna start with that just by showing you. The idea for this section was that when you put the arpeggiator inside your software, instantly when you press play, you have some sound. This is a very basic double FM oscillator. So, for example, if you're familiar with the Ableton operator, you know how it works. So here you have the chords of each oscillator and how they go into each other. Very simple. Of course, there is a little delay because with the arpeggiator you have to use a delay. It's the rule, you know. I didn't invent the rule, Tangerine Dream did. So very easy. Once again, you have the 316, which I think is cool, one of my favorites and sometimes missing. Either free or sync. The ping pong, the low pass and high pass, so you're gonna be able to mold better which frequencies. And the stereo, if the ping pong is on, is gonna be useful, obviously. I wanted to show you this first, because since there is a synthesizer inside, it's gonna be recognized as a synth and not as a Midi effect by your software. So there is a little manipulation you have to do. I'm gonna show you on Ableton, but this works everywhere. You're gonna go to the Midi track when you want to receive the notes. And then you're gonna go here to the track where you set up previously your arpeggiator, and there you're gonna choose BLEASS Arpeggiator. So now you see it's receiving what I'm sending, and now I can send it to the modular synthesizer. Of course, it works with everything. It works with the plugins, it works with any synthesizer you want. So now let's go to the arpeggiator section. I'm gonna start with this right side. They kind of work together. And they are the ones who control, I would say, the melody, the notes that are played. As this section rather controls the rhythm. So first we're gonna start with the play modes. You're gonna recognize some of them, they work exactly as usual. So normal is as played, up is gonna be up. You don't see down, for example. That's because there is a reverse button. If I do up and reverse, it's gonna play backwards. And that's how we get some special combinations. Forward and backwards work the same way as you can imagine. Okay, now we got the real Final Fantasy vibes out there. So there's a lot that you know, like the Pinky or the Thumb, they're pretty classic. So let's start with some more special ones, you know? So let's start with the Lookup and the Climp up. These ones are inspired, like many others, by some kind of ways you could play on the piano. A piano player will of course play the notes regularly, but he will also use some rhythm. For example, 1 out of 2. Or like 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. And so that's what these modes are, you know? So if we put it back to our notes and apply that, we get this effect. And I think Climp Up is one of my favorites, especially reverb, if it goes a bit fast, you know. It's a really nice effect, you know, brings some life instantly. I think it's really cool. Next we have the Trance one. This is some stuff that I really wanted on a synthesizer. The idea to play some classic trance patterns. The best way to know how to play them when you discover the play modes is to try hitting a lot of notes and see how they react, you know? For this one, for example, the trick will be to play one low note, the bass, and play something with your right hand with a lot of notes. We tried to use some logic mathematic functions to imitate, reproduce the order of a sequencer. So, you know, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 4, 1, 4, 5. All this play mode is going to be thought this way, basically. Then we have a lot of other ones that are more personal, like personal influences. For example, the Morricone is influenced by the ecstasy of gold. It will work only if you play the right notes. You know, it's like some kind of Easter egg, I would say, like this. And of course like that. So if you know the opening of Ecstasy of Gold, that's how we got the concept. Now you can play with anything. And whatever you play is gonna adapt. Another funny one was the continue sound that was inspired by the old Sega Mega Drive Sonic continue effect. So the idea is to play one note out of two. And etc. and it loops and you can go as high as you want, you know. And the last example, this one is from the Isao Tomita album. Snowflakes Are Dancing, and it's a cover of Debussy with analog synthesizers. And so there was this very beautiful introduction. So it's kind of a mix between a Climb Up and a Pinky. I've always been a big fan of both Isao Tomita and Debussy, so big shout out to both of them. Let's see what else we have in store. Obviously the octave range. So it goes as high as you want. Then the octave offset. You know there are a lot of offset on the plugin. This would just like put it one later, so you're gonna start on the second octave. And like this is true in the other way. You can start lower if you want. This is gonna be useful especially when you start to modulate and tell him to do crazy stuff with the motion sequencer. Then we have the note repeat. Basically it's on one, but you can tell him to play some step several times. So if you use it correctly, you're going to be able to have that kind of ratchet effect. Then the gate, if the notes are long or not, you can go over to 400, which can be useful with certain synthesizers, like melt into some kind of pads. The offset right here, same thing. You're just going to be able to put one note lower and one note higher. It affects the start of your sequence. One cool thing is that you can move it while it's playing. It will adapt automatically. So same thing, when you start to modulate it, you can get some crazy results. Step jump is pretty useful as well. You're going to say, I don't play this note and this one. It's going to jump one note, you know. If you say 3, it's going to play every 3 note. 1, 2, 3. Good way to give it even more life. And finally, the repeats. Basically, it's infinite on every arpeggiator, but you can choose the number of repetitions. So if you choose to put only 1 repeat, it's gonna stop. And it can be pretty useful if you do some weird things, even like with some random or something like that. Alright, next the polyphony part. There's the chord trigger mode that we all know, so it's gonna play every chord if it's on. When it's off, You have here this polyphony button. This displays the number of notes that is going to be played. So obviously if it's 1, it's going to play only 1 note. If I put it to 2, everything lights up here, you know? You get to a whole new polyphonic mode. And you can play 2 notes together. So gap right here, you can see, is the gap between 1 note. So when I put it to 2, for example, or 3, you can have some interesting results. You can go up to 4 polyphonic notes. 3 is cool with like a gap of 2, for example. Then there is this bass mode. The idea is to be able to have another bass that is the lowest bass of our chord. So here is going to be this note. That's going to be mirrored one octave down. This bass part is especially useful if you start to play live on the piano. You're going to want to have your bass all the time, you know? Especially if you change. Then these 2 notes can be played in normal order or mirrored. And finally, the velocity spread. For this one, you're going to be able to choose which note is most heard in your chord. So depending on how you set it up, you're going to be able to hear more the root note that you entered first, that you played, or the notes that were generated through the polyphony device. And finally, the velocity section, very simple. Fixed on, you can choose the velocity of your note. And that is really cool, I think, you can add directly here some randomness, which is very useful to give live to your synthesizers. Actually, while developing this plugin, I know Bliss had a discussion with Jean-Michel Jarre. They are working together on some projects, and he told them that it was very, very important that there was some ways to control the velocity if they do an arpeggiator, so word from the master, you know. Alright, let's move on to the rhythm section with pattern, trigger and reset. First off, pattern. As you can see, we have the choice between a lot of different patterns. These are all Euclidean. So, pretty easy to read, you know? You just see what's on the screen and the note hits only at the moments where the slice is full. If we use next, it's going to play 2 out of 4, for example with this one. But it's gonna play the next ones, you know? It's just gonna like switch to the next one that would be played normally. But if we are in the mute mode, it's gonna play as if it was playing in the normal mode, you know, with pattern off. But it's gonna mute the notes. And this is really interesting when you want to start playing with the pattern as something that moves, but not too much, you know? Then of course we have the usual offset that we just play 1 note later on 1 note earlier, depending on what you want. And finally chance is just a regular probability number, you know? Next, the trigger section. The beginning is pretty regular. The free mode. Then the sync mode, and the beat mode. So what exactly is the difference? It's a bit subtle. For the beat mode, it's always going to be on the beat. No matter where you start, it's always going to be at the same rhythm as your software. But if you put it in sync, it's going to still be in sync with your software, but you can start it anywhere. So I'm going to try to be obvious on this one. But you can also... You see? It's in sync, but it starts only when you play the notes. Next you have the usual rate, you know. It's going to be exciting to trigger with the motion, of course. And the multiplier. And of course the groove. And we have an option that is pretty useful when you put when you're going to put an LFO or a motion on the rate. You can say no triplets, so it's not going to go through this, you know. It's going to go directly. And same, but if you want only triplets, you know. So it's going to skip one and go directly to the next one. And finally, the MIDI note trigger, which is something that I wanted for a long time on an arpeggiator. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I'm very happy that BLEASS finally made it possible. So here's how it works. You see this red note right here? It appears only when I go to MIDI trigger mode. I'm gonna choose D2, for example, so this note for me. And so this note goes red, you know? You can see every time I click it, what happens, right? I'm gonna press my regular notes, the notes from my arpeggio, and every time I press here, it's gonna activate the next step of my arpeggiator. You can use it in chord trigger mode as well. So you can directly play whatever groove you want. So another cool thing that you can do is actually create a track and put the rhythm you want in it, something like that. Now BLEASS is going to receive this note as a trigger, you see here, and you can play whatever you want and you will always be on the rhythm. You can even have like your friend drummer going with you, triggering the drums, and you can read that and it will play your arpeggiator. So, where are the drummers? And last but not least, the reset part. When it's off, it just goes normally, you know, infinitely. But when I turn it on, it's gonna read the rate right here. For example here, 1 bar, and it's gonna reset every time. The really interesting thing about this is when you start to put some patterns into the equation, because it's not just gonna reset the notes in the order where you ask, it's also gonna reset the pattern from the beginning. So you can reset your whole sequence. You can choose to reset the LFO and the motion as well. And then we have the same thing, we have the MIDI note, so we can reset it with an input. So here I've choose D2 again. So we got this high-pitched little sequence, for example. And every time I'm gonna press the note, the reset note, it's gonna play everything from the moment I press it, you know? So with one note you can trigger your whole arpeggiator. Next on is the motion sequencer. Okay, let's turn it on. With this one you have a classic sequencer, so you can change the resolution, the length, you know? And you can write anything just like a regular sequencer. You can change also the form, the shape of each step. And then it's gonna give a value right here, you know. Then you can add to any parameter. This is a pretty unique feature, you know, I'm really a big fan of that. For example, we're gonna modify the trigger sync rate right here. So you see, there is this little line right here now. So if I press play without the motion, it's going to be like this. If I put the motion on, And because we are in sync mode, it will always be on time. And remember earlier I told you about the no triplets mode, let's do that, you know. Like I choose up to 2 parameters. So for example, I can tell that I want more notes. And if I go to trigger free mode, for example, I can really have this effect with this parameter where it's gonna always dive between different speeds and never stop. You see? You can put it in beat mode so it will be always synced, just as earlier actually. In sync mode, so it's gonna do its own life. Or you can put note change. Every time you're gonna press a note, it's gonna skip to the next beat, you know? Which can be interesting too. And one feature that I really like as well, let's reset the whole thing, is gonna be that you can just right on the spot like this, add some randomness. So all the game is going to be about fine-tuning this randomness, this sync rate, and your original value. Let's try with pattern. You see what's happening right here, and this is something you have to take in account. It's going between up and down value, so it will add or it will remove, you know? So when it goes up, it will add a value between 1 and 62, but when here it goes down, nothing's gonna happen because it cannot go lower than off. So when I talk about fine-tuning, for example, here, if you want the whole pattern thing to work, you have to go in the middle and say, I'm going to just work around 50%. And now you will have the whole pattern, sometimes going up, sometimes going down, you know? And if you combine it with our earlier stuff, you start to getting some cool results. Then the LFO section is basically working in the same way, you know? You got your destination, the same exact stuff you can move. Few little things though. Free sync and beat, same thing as earlier. You can choose a few shapes for your LFO. There is this smooth and time shape that are cool. For example, you can tell the speed to be exponential or logarithmic. And the smooth, so you know when it's not there, it's really a square. And if I add some smooth, it's just gonna smooth the angles, you know, which is really helpful if you do some random, for example. It's cool that there are 2 LFOs because of course you can do this little game where LFO2 is modulating LFO1, and then you have some really crazy rhythms. You see here, it's really acting wild. And finally, the performance is the same thing, but more destined to being played live, which means you have your destination same as usual here, and when you move the XY, it's gonna move what you parametered, and then map a single knob on the XY, for example. You have 4 of them. You have a hold option, which will be useful, especially if you use the knobs. You have a mod wheel as well, so you can use, you see right here, so I would like my mod wheel to repeat the notes, for example. You see, the farther it is, the more it's going to repeat. Same thing. Let's do it with the sync rate, just because it's so obvious. So this works with your mod wheel, and this is going to work as well if you're on an iPad or some kind of device like this. Alright guys, now you know everything about the BLEASS X Canblaster Arpeggiator collaboration. I'm really happy it's out after working for so long with the guys. I hope you can get your hands on it and tell me what you think about it. I don't think this is the last thing we're gonna do together. Probably there are a lot of ideas we couldn't implement in this version, so if you have any more ideas we could use or any debug that you notice, don't hesitate to contact us. We are very curious what you think about the project.